Hello, sometimes I do interviews with interesting people around the world who have an interesting perspective on global situations. And we've seen in South Africa over the past few decades how it's changed. And there's a sort of slide into lawlessness. And I'm joined today by Mr. Thomas Buchar, not Buchar, as I called him earlier, who is an investor, a technologist, does all kinds of stuff, but moved to South Africa and has seen firsthand how it's changed, and has also fallen foul personally of the sort of the breakdown of the institutions and the breakdown of law and order. So we're going to talk about South Africa as a whole, and then Thomas, you can tell us about your personal situation, which is pretty crazy. Some parts of it are quite funny, and I'm glad it happened to you and not me. But yeah,
well, I'm laughing now. Two months later, I'm laughing now, but that wasn't the case 2 months ago.
Yeah, well, I can believe it. I'm amazed. I'm amazed you're so chill about it now. But yeah, just to kick off, because you've been going to South Africa for some years, and then you moved there. You moved there last year, was it?
Yeah, we moved here last year. We've been visiting, visitor business, doing business in South Africa and visiting for the last 33 years. In fact, my first business was in media. I used to syndicate content. Back then, you called it television programming. I used to syndicate content in 60 different countries in the emerging markets.
Right. Wow.
And we sold that company to Polygram back in 1994.
Yeah. So you would have seen that's in the 90s. So that was I can't remember the exact date that apartheid fell, and it was this sort of rainbow revolution, and it was all going to be great. Everybody was holding hands in harmony, and it seemed like that for a while. But now, have you seen the sort of the descent? Because now there seems to be just endemic corruption in the ruling party, the ANC. They're actually not they're to form a sort of coalition government at the last election. So have you seen the sort of the breakdown of the institutions post apartheid?
Oh, yeah. Yes. We unfortunately, we've seen it. But I think it started off with a lot of hope. Just to give a little background. Apartheid wasn't sustainable, obviously, and you're just like any election when you have free and fair elections. I mean, the populace is going to dictate which direction the country is going to go. However, I think that the transformative figure in this was Nelson Mandela. Obviously, a tremendous amount of respect for the man. I think that it started on with all the correct intentions, and I think when they had the Truth and Reconciliation hearings, to come out, let's say what it is, and then put it behind us. I think that was the right approach. Yeah. However, what the ANC had. There was a number of institutions that were, very, very pragmatic and very well thought out, with incredible infrastructure. Whether that was the Department of the Interiors, whether that's the Justice Departments, whether that was, the police state, which obviously, definitively made some mistakes during apartheid. However, the infrastructure of those institutions were very much solid and in line, and especially when you had a rule of law. And then obviously after I think there was a lot of power vacuums that were created after Mandela left office after 2 terms. The administration of Mugabe was next. But there was a lot of infighting within the ANC themselves, and I don't think a lot of people realized is a lot of that undermining really, we can really pin it on one person. I mean, that was really Jacob Zuma, who a lot of people don't know this, but I mean, Jacob Zuma was in charge of the ANC's intelligence apparatus, or what there was, for somebody who basically can't spell or count, but. But that's the truth, and obviously he
still sounds better. It still sounds better than Keir Starmer somehow. I don't know how that
works. I can't figure out what that parallel is yet, but okay, I'll take that. But but there was a lot of undermining. I think that happened during the Zuma administration. Obviously, he undermined Mbeki, who was the successor to Mandela itself, and undermining Mbeki came to undermine the rest of those institutions, and unfortunately, you have. When you sink into that type of lawlessness, it's not just the lawlessness itself; it's actually the enforcement of the laws that that become a bigger issue other than just the lawlessness itself.
And I guess the ANC, because they were such like South Africa was a single party country for so long because the ANC were so popular. I guess just the sort of the heritage of Mandela and the end of apartheid meant that everybody just voted for them. So they because of the lack of competitiveness in politics, they didn't have other parties holding them to account, or they didn't have the fear of other parties taking over. We've seen that now with they formed a coalition government with their
the Democratic Alliance. So currently you have a government of national unity, and which was bound to happen. But I think that they ended up the ANC ended up with a power share now with the Democratic Alliance. But what was your alternative? The new party that was created by Jacob Zuma that created the bigger part of this mess, and then the EFF itself.
The EFF, man, I saw footage of the EFF. This is why I first started sort of paying attention to South Africa some more. Like there's some sort of parallels with Zimbabwe that worried me a bit. But then I saw videos of this guy Julius Malema. So he's the head of the EFF, who are a sort of populist Marxist party who tell the populace, everything is the rich people's fault, everything is the white guy's fault, which is quite a sort of intoxicating message. You hear it from Labour in this country as well, but in fact it's sort of they're sort of almost ahead of the curve on critical race theory. But he was doing big rallies in stadiums and chanting, kill the Boer, kill the white farmer, to like stadiums full of like 20,000 people. And I was like, man, this is like this guy, and he was like getting close to getting. I think he got a couple of they got a couple of the constituencies, and he was getting close to sort of the portion of the vote where he'd be a kingmaker in the election in any sort of coalition government. I mean, luckily that didn't happen, and they sort of made a coalition with a different government. But like looking at what happened in Zimbabwe, which obviously under Mugabe, when Zimbabwe gained independence from, I guess, its version of apartheid, there was a much more rapid fall from being a really sort of stable, prosperous country with, it was called the breadbasket of Africa, huge agricultural exports and tobacco exports. So it was making a lot of money, and it was also feeding not only its own people. It was like Zimbabwe was growing so much food, it was exporting and feeding a lot of Africa. And that flipped. Then, due to mismanagement by Mugabe, he handed over the farms to his cronies who, they weren't farmers, so they didn't know how to farm. So they'd eat the seeds that were supposed to be planted and then scrap the tractors and all the rest of it. And then, so they'd be rich for 6 months and then they'd be screwed. Like Zimbabwe seemed to have a much faster fall, but then like looking at what's happening, the rhetoric coming from the EFF. Do you see any parallels with South Africa, and do you see the potential for South Africa to go that way?
Listen, there's always potential for South Africa, to go away in which it's going to be detrimental to its economy or, detrimental to, the fabric of its society itself. I think that there's a lot to learn from what happened with Zimbabwe, initially. I think that, you have a more diversified economy and a very strong economy in South Africa in comparison, right? But much more diversified. So I still think that you have business that can give you some clarity on which direction the winds blow socially. I think that underlying that, a bigger part of the populace does utilize the lessons of what transpired in Zimbabwe. But the bigger part of that is, again, having more of a dictatorial rule, autocratic rule when Mugabe came into power itself, and then nobody questioned that power, right?
Yeah.
So you've got a little bit of, let's call it the Mandela legacy on how this government was initially set up, taking over those, some of the institutions and take all the good parts of those institutions in which you can, form a democracy that will be able to survive. But, be careful for what you wish for.
Well,
Also,
the eternal lesson for Marxists
in Egypt, and look at what look at what you ended up with. With the Muslim Brotherhood. Not to say that that is what the populists initially wanted, but also the Middle East. I think that those countries operate much better under an autocrat than they do with democracy. Half the Middle East doesn't.
You certainly see that in Gaza as well, where Hamas were democratically elected. I think that was the last, the end of the sort of democratic elections there. But certainly at the start, they were elected by the people. Now they're sort of dictators in Gaza.
If you want to be a dictator over an open air prison, I suppose that's a victory, right? But definitively, look at what they've done to their people. The Middle East is a whole different story. Talking about democracy and how democracy translates across the globe, but I don't think.
Yeah, although I guess there's parallels with South Africa and Zimbabwe in that they're European settlers or colonizers, the kids would call them now. We've got to decolonize everything, including Britain for some reason. But they call them colonizers, and they say, oh, Britain, Britain caused all these problems. Britain set up the boundaries, set up the borders, and decided that this was going to be Lebanon was going to be majority Christian, and blah blah blah. So it all gets blamed on British people at the end. It's interesting that Owen Jones, I know this is getting a bit away from the topic of South Africa, but Owen Jones responded to, he's a left-wing journalist, and he responded to the criticism of Hamas executing homosexuals, and he said, oh, they're just following a law that was passed by the British in 1914 or something. And it's like, you're telling me Hamas are like, oh guys, no, we've got to throw these gay guys off the roof because there's this law written in 1914 by the British that means we have to do it. There's some other laws they're not following.
Back in the States, we call that, Monday morning quarterbacking. It's like, that's presentism, and that's also a trend today, which comes into where woke really went amok. And presentism means what is norms in today's society, and then what you happen when we had the same thing happen, in the United States, but. For instance, we had a relationship with Oxford University, and some time that we were spending at Oxford with one of our innovation programs. They want to take down the statues of Cecil Rhodes and like Cecil Rhodes or any of these figures in history from 100 years ago, 200 years ago, they were supposed to be, accountable for the norms that we have today. Yeah. Right, and then you have this big woke movement around presentism. Now, I'm the left of center guy who's saying that woke is a muck. But when you try to adopt, today's values and try to blame, they did the same thing in the United States. Oh, George Washington was a horrible person. He was the founder of our country, and so is Thomas Jefferson because he owned slaves. Unfortunately, that was the norm in that time, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure that you've done the really stupid shit when you were 10 years old, and you're, probably close to my age now.
I had loads of slaves. Oh my God, I had loads of slaves.
You can go back and kick your 10-year-old ass. I bet you would do it. But that's presentism, man. Right? How are you supposed to know, right?
A lot of these people like
norms are going to be 50 years later.
Yeah, Cecil Rhodes, for example, and who is the person who, I guess, established Rhodesia. Rhodesia was named after him. Then, after independence, it was named Zimbabwe. He was, by the standards of the time, he was a pretty progressive guy, and also he funded this university that's now, half the students want to tear down his statues. It just shows why you should never help anyone, never give to charity, never set up a foundation. never try and stop anyone starving, because as soon as you help them not starve to death, or as soon as you help them get their degrees, they're going to turn around and just take a big dump on your legacy. And I guess, I mean, I have to defend Mugabe as well, because I think some people would defend him by saying, well, Zimbabwe, thanks to his hyperinflation, everybody in Zimbabwe is now a trillionaire, which sounds good, and also there's no obesity problem in Zimbabwe anymore. So he cured that as well. Maybe we could get him to run Scotland for a bit. Probably be an improvement in the SNP. And have you personally, you know, I've seen news reports about the sort of the rule of law breaking down in South Africa, and there have, you know, Julius Malema, for all that people defend his, you know, Marxist decolonizer rhetoric, you know, when he says kill the white farmer, kill the Boer, people say, oh, it's just a saying. But there are, you know, farmers killed in South Africa, obviously not on the same scale as Zimbabwe. But have you felt unsafe in South Africa?
To be honest with you, I never felt unsafe until this last year, in which
right.
You start, you know, things start happening and people start crossing lines. And I think that because of, you know, what we you know, never haven't been shut down by cops before on the roads. Everybody has, right? You get pulled over, you know, here, we're going to take you in unless you're, you know, able to create bond, and okay, you know, here's the payoff. It happens to everybody, but that is part of the social fabric. Like, you have to start with those small things. You know, I'll regress for a minute, but, you know, it's broken window theory. If you have that kind of corruption going on at that particular level and you don't break down on it, the corruption just gets worse. But more importantly, it's about the enforcement of those laws, right? And if you don't enforce the laws at that particular level, right, and you have proper enforcement of the laws, but also a respectable force that enforces those laws at that particular level. Not to say that everybody is corrupt, they're not, and because, you know, like right now, we're being helped by what they call the Hawks, right? It's like the FBI or Scotland Yard on our particular predicament.
On your issue, so do you want to just explain what your issue is? Because I mean, I think it's I was pretty shocked to hear this. And I was pretty shocked to hear that you're still staying in South Africa after it happened. But yeah, if you want to just explain.
Yeah, no, it's pretty shocking when, like, a Golden Circle, you know, law firm's partner gets suspended. But anyway, the case in point is, you know, we were renting a house, a luxury house here in South Africa, on a wildlife reserve. And there were some problems, and it wasn't a fly-by-night thing, because everybody was trying to, you know, spin it that, you know, we're some fly-by-night Americans who were trying to make a splash. No, we rented this house and literally spent 30 days in that house the first year that we rented it, but there was a lot of inherent problems with it. More importantly, it was a luxury house, but more importantly, the electricity was, and this wasn't just Eskom, the electricity was intermittent. You know, the circuit breakers were blowing in fact, the DB box, which they call the circuit breaker box, actually started on fire at one point. So, you know, anyway, long story short, dispute with the owner of the house, and we just held back the rent. We held back the rent so we would get action, and then some action happened, and that problem still persisted. But instead of, like, actually going to court, first, we had this gentleman who turns out to be a gangster from Johannesburg, came over to the house and threatened to kill us, right? And so, great introduction, right?
Was this the landlord, or was this one of?
Yeah, it was the landlord. We used the courts. The court turned down our order of protection, even though, you know, we have witnesses, and this person came in and initially did this. Well, when we still wouldn't, when we still wouldn't succumb to that advance, he and his lawyer had this phenomenal idea to come to this frontier town, because that's exactly where we live. We live in a frontier town, very close to the Kruger. And and when you have a big swinging dick lawyer from a Golden Circle law firm that shows up, I guess people will just listen to them. So in some form or fashion, was able to convince both the HOA that ran the reserve we lived on, including our estate agent, that it was going to be perfectly legal for them to just move back into the house and steal all of our belongings while we were gone. And that's exactly what happened, right? Now, the point of that story is, like, if there wasn't the opportunity, or if they didn't see the opportunity in which there was a complete breakdown in the law, because there's actually, this is very illegal. There's a thing called the PI Act. I mean, this is basic common law in South Africa. Is like, you don't do this, but they had the audacity, and maybe they never Googled me, but they had the audacity to actually pull this off, right?
So they went into your house. They went into your house and took all your stuff, and it's not just like personal stuff. It's not just your furniture and your clothes or whatever. It's like you ran your business from your house. You had source codes and hard drives and all the rest of it to run your business.
No, they absolutely took everything. Okay, and then this genius from this law firm decides that he's going to write our lawyers a letter and admits that they took everything and they're holding it hostage, right? Okay. So it's not a matter of whether this person was smart. It's just the hubris in which. Yeah. Then this is the breakdown. This is what I mean about the breakdowns of the institutions. Even the hubris that's behind that. These people really thought that this is what they were going to get away with, right? That they were going to be able to do this. You're in a frontier town, and literally, like, when this happened, I mean, it's a longer story, but but to give you the basics, obviously, we went to court. We got what's called a spoliation order that gave us a court order for us to retake the house. Well, I think the local enforcement with the police was compromised because even though we had a court order to go back and take back the house, they threatened to arrest us if we went back into the house. So here's a court order from a magistrate that you can repossess the house and go back and take your things. However, if you broke into the house, they were going to arrest you. Now, that only happens unless the security apparatus itself within that town is compromised, because it's beyond comprehension. And then for an entire month, the official theft report that we then reported to the police, that somehow disappeared. But thank God, I know a little bit about technology. And so before the police took the report away, I made a copy of it. And then I made a copy with Genius Scan on my phone. And so I had a copy, even though a month later, this case disappeared miraculously, but I still had the case still on my phone, and our lawyers were able to get that reinstituted. But it passed an entire other month in which they would not file charges, and actually just in the last 2 days, we were contacted by the Hawks, which is, like I said, the equivalent of the FBI or Scotland Yard. And they have now taken over the investigation. So we would. So
this is hopefully this is an outside agency to the regular police. So they're hopefully uncorruptible or less corruptible. They're certainly not.
I would say, just dealing with them. No, I don't think that. No, I mean, I think that's why they select. There's a very select few people that end up in the Hawks themselves, and they've been nothing but accommodating. Believe me, deep inside, we were initially scarred by this whole, but it's so ridiculous you can do nothing but laugh, right?
Yeah. So, but are you in the house right now?
Oh no, we had to go and we rented another house.
Right.
After your life is threatened and something like that happens, I don't think that you want to go and stay in the same house anymore. But no, we went and found other dwellings.
Are you not worried? Given that there've been threats to your life by a gangster, and you're in South Africa, which by your own admission doesn't have the absolute best sort of rule of law and order. Are you not worried that there is a legitimate threat to your life? I mean, I'd be sitting there with an AK-47 like Al Pacino in Scarface.
You mean the one that's like on the EFF flags? Is the AK-47s on that?
Yeah. Flag, your local Marxist AK-47.
Like I said, I grew up in a very tough neighborhood. I actually grew up in the States, in the murder capital of the world, which is Gary, Indiana. Right. So, so am I going to be easily intimidated? No. Are we concerned? I'm not a fool. Yeah, we're concerned, but we selected South Africa for a reason. I think it's a beautiful country with a lot of promise, and I'm not going to be that easily intimidated. But even with our a lot of our business associates and stuff are, because there's things that obviously came in the press. Some of it was salacious. They didn't like the headings of some of it, but people are like, well, why'd you compromise yourself like that? Well, I would have compromised myself if I didn't do that, right?
Yeah.
And if I didn't go public with it, then you're doing a larger disservice. Okay, and we'll have a follow-up conversation to this at some other point. I mean, but there's just so many wrongs to all of this. But I'm not the type of person that's going to lay down and let somebody walk over me, like a lamb, and it just isn't going to happen. Right?
Yeah, and this is a substantial amount of stuff that they took. I mean, what's the value of the stuff they took?
Oh, literally with the business interruption claims and everything, it's in excess of $6 million USD.
Jesus, and also it's like you say, the business interruption. It's affected the sort of day-to-day running of your business because they've taken hard drives, the codes you need for running your business. I mean, that's were you not tempted to just say to them, "I'll pay whatever you want and get it back"?
No, because they, I already knew what the law was. We were already going through, obviously something traumatic when this gangster came and threatened our lives. I'm going to say his name's Nick Spencer. Okay, I'm not going to be afraid to say that. He has a nefarious past. It's in fact we had quite a few people reach out to us about this person and some of his activities. So that was one of the upsides of going public with that.
Nick Spencer, just if you're watching, I just want to say I'm on your side. Before you send anybody to my house to take, I've got at least 45 pence worth of stuff here, and I want it to stay where it is. And this lawyer, there's a lawyer suspended from this Golden Circle law firm who attended the property and I guess helped the guy throw his weight around, not just physically but also legally, and intimidate the local law enforcement. And he's been suspended. I mean, that's a pretty big deal. He's been suspended from his law firm.
I think they did take immediate action. They didn't take action when we made the local office pay attention, but when we let the rest of the firm know, and they're Anglo-American firm, when we reach out to their partners, I mean, they automatically suspended them, and they took faster action than the actual local police, to tell you the truth. So we would expect further cooperation with them.
I guess it's terrible. It's terrible PR for a big law firm like that. And you got some.
I would think so. I mean, I'm sure that they think that it was terrible PR for what my initial outreach to the press was. But I don't care. If you're going to disrupt my life, I mean, somebody's going to disrupt my life, I'm going to disrupt yours. And and believe me, I have a much better story, right? I don't have a law degree, and I wasn't the one who decided to actually show up and be on premise while a theft was in progress, and then try to defend it. So I think everybody's kind of stymied. Why a partner at a global firm would go as far as that they did, and also put it in writing. It's like anything I've said now. Sure, hey, come at me. I'll give everybody the emails that we received. There's nothing I'm telling you that he didn't say, and I really don't care.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy that they'd act with such impunity and leave a paper trail of what they're doing. I guess it shows the extent of the corruption that they didn't even think we need to cover our backs with this.
But that's it, right? I mean, listen, there's other issues that firm has here in South Africa, and anybody can easily Google that. But when you're not running a tight ship, this is the stuff. This is the type of stuff that happens. And so, we're inferior, or we're everybody else is inferior to us. And pretty much, there's a breakdown of the rule of law. So let's go ahead and push it to the maximum extent, right? Yeah. And that goes back to broken window theory. I mean, there was one time, we had a great, mayor in New York. His name was Rudolph Giuliani before he went off the fucking deep end, right? But he did some, phenomenal stuff in New York, right? I mean, when he was mayor, right? And you got to start with the small stuff, or it turns into bigger stuff, just like this.
It's interesting. It's interesting talking about broken windows, because I worked in criminal intelligence in the sort of early noughties. When broken windows had been, Rudolph Giuliani implemented broken windows in New York, and it's this idea that if you deal with the little things like broken windows, graffiti, just little environmental things, you create an environment where people don't feel that they don't feel that they can commit crime, because it's, there's people watching. It's just not the sort of an environment conducive to committing crime. So it takes, previously, I guess criminology took the approach that criminals are bad people. They've got a thing in their brain that makes them want to commit crime. Whereas then policing moved to a more sort of the idea that there's a big portion of the population who want to commit crime, and the crimes are opportunistic. So broken windows was an idea of making the whole city a place where crime wouldn't take place, and I think it really worked. There's some. It's obviously it's hard to pin down on one thing. There's also the economic growth. When you've got a thriving jobs market and people are busy doing other things, they're not going to commit crime. There's also the theory that having access to abortions meant you didn't have children being raised by mothers who weren't engaged. You had children being raised in better environments and being given more, I guess, love, and so then they grew up to be to be less likely to go into crime. But yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of good theory in policing and criminal intelligence that came out of New York, Baltimore, Philadelphia. Also problem-solving policing. The idea that crime problems aren't necessarily best dealt with by the police. The police response is always to just chuck lots of guys in yellow jackets at the problem, and all that does is push up your crime figures, because the crime's still happening. You're just getting a lot more people arrested. So instead, it was like looking at problem-solving policing was looking at the sort of root causes of the problem. So, for example, when I was working for the police, there was an issue with fights after nightclubs kicked out, and the police did all these things. They put people there to arrest the guys who are fighting and provide surveillance and stuff. I did some analysis and found out the real problem was there weren't transport links away. There was no taxi rank. There were very few buses. So there weren't, people were milling around and, getting into trouble. There was shops that were selling them bottles, so people were buying them, and then they had a bottle in their hand, so that's a weapon. So what we did was we changed the bus routes, put on more buses, put a taxi rank in there, and just having the people disperse from the area, them having the opportunity to disperse themselves, solved the problem with nighttime disorder. It's interesting how I guess everything got more sophisticated.
Listen, I think that's cause and effect, right? And when you're really thinking it out and what are the causes of this, I think everybody's capable of crime, right? I think everybody, if you're seeing everybody do it, that's broken window, right? If everybody else is doing it, well, it's okay for me to do it, right? But also I think listen, I think that there's this downward trend in crime, like in the 90s, specifically what we experienced in the United States. I've never been to other areas that have the type of crime, except perhaps maybe parts of South Africa, but I haven't been exposed to the types of crime that we have in the States. But you can see right now, even, listen, why are we having this political trend? Why did we elect a convicted felon into the presidency again?
Oh, he's not really a convicted felon. Those are just made up charges.
The people have spoken. We could argue about that point later.
Yeah, the ultimate jury.
But look at the reason that people do. Why did we go to this? Well, because it's a position of strength. And if you really look at how wokeism has really run amok now, and we're in the 90s, we started getting crime under control. Well, look at my hometown. I'm originally from Chicago. You can walk into any establishment, and you can steal up to $900 without having to post bond or getting arrested, right?
Yeah.
That's open season. So how does this make any sense to say that this is okay? Literally, My life partner has been in a store in Chicago, and I'll even say the name of the store, Lululemon, and she's she's trying to buy something in the store, and like, oh, are you looking for this particular, I don't know, jogger bra or whatever it is? Oh yeah, man, we'd sell that to you, but over here, this woman is a frequent visitor to our store, and she's a shoplifter, and she's taking the item that you want right now. I'm not even making this up. Okay,
Yeah.
and so the policy of the retail stores is just let this happen, but also the policy of the enforcement of those laws is just let it happen, and we can't bother ourselves with any crime, any felony that's being committed that's not at least $900, right?
It's the
That's
same in the
okay?
UK. I think it's a £200. Like the police, I don't know if they actually penalise you, but the police don't like being called out if it's an offence that's under a certain value, and I think that's £200. And the trouble with shoplifting from Lululemon is you steal two pairs of leggings, you're instantly over £900. It's that stuff is so expensive, and it's the same stuff. I've seen my wife gets it. It's like the exact same stuff as the 12 quid stuff from Amazon or from Shein, but yeah, it's got the Lululemon badge on it, so I guess they like it. And yeah, I mean, because we've seen in the last few years under the Democrats and under British left wing governments. Unfortunately, our Conservative Party are very left wing as well. We've seen this sort of slide. I think there's been a slide backwards in terms of the sort of law and order. And like you're talking about, shoplifting has been pretty much decriminalised. A lot of crimes seem to have been pretty much decriminalised. Everywhere you walk in London, you smell people smoking weed. And I'm sort of concerned that this is weak men creating bad times, and we're going to see the breakdown of society. I think Britain used to be quite a high trust society, and I think a lot of parts of America were high trust societies where you could people would help each other out, and people wouldn't commit crime, and they'd feel some sort of sense of shame. And I think we're sliding back. I mean, do you think that's happened in South Africa at all, or is that?
Oh, well, yeah, no, I mean, of course. I mean, it's theft like that it's endemic. I mean, it's everywhere, right? And you do have institutions that are trying to stand up to this. I think that the ANC, there was a lot of help that the ANC is. That's why they created the Government for National Unity. Now, they haven't turned over to the Justice Department yet, or the Ministry of Police yet, to be run by the Democratic Alliance. However, I believe that it was purposeful, and why they reached out to a better run, better administrative political organization like the Democratic Alliance, in which there is structure and there's discipline within that and within those ranks. But I think this is also becoming a broader phenomenon than just what's happening here. It's unfortunate for what we had to go through in South Africa itself, but I also think, as your point well taken, when you have crime running amok, and you go back to broken windows theory, and you see what's happening in the cities themselves, right? My family members all live outside of the city of Chicago, although we lived in Chicago for 30 plus years in Chicago proper. But even that crime is spilling out over into the suburbs, right? You're having crimes that are being that are happening, transgressions that are happening that you didn't see 30 years ago, you didn't see 40 years ago, right? And so those bedroom communities are now being attacked, you're probably experiencing some of the same in the UK. So if you don't stop it from its core and where this is initially transpiring, it's just going to continue to spill over.
And I think when we see governments, because in the UK, we see certain things policed extremely rigorously. So any sort of hate speech is, even one of my neighbours. One of my neighbours phoned the police on me, and it was like an accusation of hate speech. Basically, it was he was doing building work, and it was annoying my child and stuff. It was my child needs to sleep because she's like 2, so it was waking up my child. So I went next door, and I wasn't like threatening or anything, but he still phoned the police. And the magic word to get the police to turn up is, you know, any sort of hate speech, any sort of racism, anything like that. And the police here, like, will send people round. Like, a journalist recently, Alison Pearson, had the police sent round to her house to issue her with a non-crime hate incident because there's somebody wearing Lululemon in the background there. I just saw a non-crime hate incident over a tweet that was a year old that called some Muslim men who are waving the flag of an anti-Semitic political party. She called them Jew haters, which, I mean, at the very worst, it's a sort of, you know, is a kind of reasonably accurate. At the worst, it's defamation. It's not a police matter. It's a civil matter. If those men felt that they'd been unfairly defamed just because they're waving this flag, then, you know, they could say something. But the police go around for stuff like that. But the police ignore the sort of the actual material physical crime, the thefts from Lululemon. The police ignore, you know, the government doesn't do anything about the illegal immigrants just arriving en masse in the country. They're just, you know, shown through, given to a hotel, issued with mobile phones, and given every help in the world, which is the opposite of what you should be doing with criminals. You shouldn't be helping and abetting and dangling a carrot for criminals to commit more crime.
But you got two separate issues there to break down, and so we'll find common ground on some of this. And as I said, I'm your compatriot, but I'm left of center. Right? But there's a lot that we can agree on, and I can agree that there's a hypersensitivity to words themselves, and when you're putting people in jail because of words, you know, I mean, you lost focus on what you should be focusing on, just like you said. So, you know, so the shoplifter at Lululemon's being ignored, but somebody's getting taken down over words. Like, you know, really? I mean, listen. There's one thing if there's a threat, and the threat is I'm going to kill you, like what we've experienced here in South Africa, for instance. However, the hypersensitivity just because somebody is using a word it's absolutely ridiculous. I think, you know, I mean, obviously the N word is extremely inappropriate in the United States, and I'm not justifying it in any way, but really, are you supposed to criminalize that? Really? I mean, you know, come on, you know, you have to, you know, create some toughness and create some tough skin, because, you know what, life isn't perfect, right? And if you aren't preparing your children for, you know, them to be able to take on the real world itself, and they're going to be hyper sensitized to, you know, every wrong that's ever happened, and then again going back to presentism, right? It's like, this is what our norms are today, but, you know, we're going to, you know, blame people in the past for what today's problems are. You're really on the wrong track, right? Yeah,
so, no, absolutely. And and do you think you'll ever get your stuff back that's been seized? Or do you think it's already? Do you think it's already been on eBay?
Here, they'll be very. Here, I'll be very open about that. You know, the person responsible, you know, for the theft that we experienced itself has claimed that they have nothing left. So, if all of a sudden anything did materialize, you know, they're already in contempt. They're going to be in more contempt because they're saying, you know, I don't have possession of this. Right. So if they all of a sudden come back into possession of it, well, you know, they're screwed either way. But no, we're realists. I mean, you know, that's gone. Have we ever been violated to this extent? I've lived in almost every major city. I lived in the UK 3 times. I lived in France. I lived in Germany. You know, we lived all over the world. You know, never been violated like this before. But also, we're realists. You know, we're not going to get anything back, which is fine. You know, right now we just want, you know, justice to be served, and we'll be happy with that. And quite frankly, you know, we're being helped right now by the Hawks, and they've been extremely accommodating and understanding on what we've been through, and I would expect that we will find solace, you know, farther downstream.
Yeah, it sounds brilliant. Just before we go, you mentioned there was a salacious, like you went to the papers about this, and they focused on one salacious aspect that I guess would titillate the readers. That's just the state of modern journalism. You know, right now it's you know, stuff like that sells. But yeah, do you want to just say what that was?
You know, clickbait. I know they were. they were more focused on, because of some of the items that were missing, and this is the paradox to this as well. when we went to confront the individual that had our stuff, we video record their reaction to us coming back onto the property to reclaim our possessions, and they seemed to be very taken with our sex toys. And in fact, they're trying to incite us to do something because they're actually claiming within the video that they have possession of these things, and how would we use this particular device, and that's what listen, clickbait, right? That kind of a thing sells, but I don't think that we were expecting the headline to read sex toys, unpaid rent, and eviction. Was going to be the headline to that, I'm sure that there was a lot of ads that were generated from that particular headline. I think Roll on Friday, which is a blog for lawyers, and what they read which was much more comprehensive and a higher level of journalism than what they initially released here in South Africa. But hey, everybody's got their thing, and if what was funny about that video though was it was like some great victory, claiming. And here's the other thing: they also incriminate themselves because, quite frankly, our sex toys had not been returned to us, so they also incriminated themselves that they had them. So,
yeah, you might want to check out some car boot sales round about round about South Africa. There's going to be some slightly dusty sex toys turning up in cardboard boxes there, but you could capitalize on it and bring out.
Well, I've been looking for them on eBay. We thought, eventually, eBay and then Facebook Market, that we'd find some of our personal belongings on there, and also obviously we're looking for replacements. So
yeah.
I should probably set up a charity for when people go through something like this and their possessions are taken and their sex toys are missing. I should probably set up a nonprofit.
Yeah.
And hopefully, I didn't break any, woke norms in which that's going to offend somebody. Like,
yeah, and you could bring out a range
that's going to be offended that we were.
You could bring out a range of ANC sex toys, an ANC dildo that fucks an entire country.
I think those are pretty popular. Branded, I should check into that. I think that there's some intellectual property that could be. I think we should register. Actually, we should register that. I think that would be a great brand. We'll get the trademark rights to that.
Okay, well, Thomas, thanks so much for speaking to me about this experience and giving some insight into your perspective on South Africa and the issues facing it, and obviously how it manifested in the issue that you're personally going through right now.
Yeah, well, no, we appreciate it. I think we had a lot of good laughs about it, but I also think that this also transcended what are some of these trends that are happening globally, and like I said, I'm your left of center guest who truly believes that woke. What people don't understand, especially like in the United States, is like why did this happen? Like how can you come with the populist president? 65% of the population is still white, right?
Yeah. And
only 7% of the population is gay. So when you feel like there's more rights being given, to all these different minority groups, well, then you're in a position from which you're going to experience this type of paradigm shift within the U.S. electorate. And
and I think even it goes beyond race to a lot of people just saw the Democrats and see left-wing politicking for what it is, and they see the sort of the growth of the state. The left always assume that the state is a benign thing, and as it gets bigger, it just looks after you. But I don't believe that. I think as the state gets bigger, it gets more intrusive and gets more violent, and it gets more corrupt. So I think keeping the state small is a good idea. But that's for another interview.
We'll explore that one. We'll do a counterpoint on that. Government can be good, believe me. If you didn't. Listen, if you didn't have the space race, you wouldn't have microchips. You wouldn't have.
Oh yeah, but look at the space race as a classic example. I mean, NASA focuses on all the government all the right talking points, the sort of the push for progressivism and representation and DEI and making sure you've got enough one-armed lesbian dwarves working there. But then SpaceX, which pursues a purely meritocratic agenda and has a diverse workforce, but not through any sort of tick box exercise, just through pursuing meritocracy. SpaceX is absolutely blowing NASA out the water in terms of efficiency, in terms of the cost of delivering satellites to space. I think it's time for governments to get out the way and let people run things.
Well, I think we're going to have a phenomenal debate in our next meeting, in which I agree with you on the efficiencies and such. But do you really democratize that type of advanced technologies, right? And that's and that's.
I think as it gets cheaper, it necessarily gets more democratic. More people, like the benefits that come from having satellite internet, from having satellite communications, they become cheaper for regular people. There'll be people out in the bush in South Africa who now have high-speed internet thanks to Starlink.
Yeah, but you also can't become so dependent on one particular entity in which it's then a threat to your own national security.
Yeah, we call that the government.
So that's a balance, and that's something we'll tackle on our next episode. Okay.
All right, cool, Thomas. Thanks so much.